Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I am your host, Corey Barrier, and I'm here with Jessica McLaren. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Great, Corey. How are you?
Good. So glad to have you on. It took us a little bit to connect, but here we are.
I know I'm excited.
I know. I was talking to Jessica just a moment ago, and we were talking about role modeling, like parents role modeling for their children, and she had done a post today, and I noticed that it was basically what I just said, and she's going to dive in a little bit deeper as far as why that's so important as a parent to be a good role model for your kid. So, Jessica, I'll let you go ahead.
Okay, so where do you want me to start? So
So
the post I shared today was, if you want to raise a great kid, you've got to be a great example. And I suppose that's the philosophy behind everything that I do at the moment.
Good. And so, walk us through who Jessica is and how she got to be the person she is today.
Gosh, where do I start? So my life's been a little bit crazy, and isn't it funny that you don't realize that your life's crazy until somebody asks you to walk them through it? So I've been doing loads of that over the last few years. I started in Australia. I was adopted, and when I was about 6 years old, my adoptive parents brought me to Scotland. And life was pretty straightforward until I was a teenager, and then that's when the rebellion began. So at 15 years old, I ran away from home. I had an older boyfriend. I always had a really good work ethic, and I always stayed at school. And so I was able to survive. Like, I was ferociously confident, and I've always been that way. Then I went to university, resolved things with my parents, and life kind of went in the expected phase. You get married, you have kids. But when I was 23, before I was married, I fostered my son, and that was an accidental situation, and it later turned into an adoption, and he's now 17 years old. So we've kind of gone through this whole cycle. He was 4 years old when we adopted him. But that whole situation changed my life completely on many levels. I experienced a young person who'd been through extreme trauma. I experienced what came along with that. So we've been through, gosh, everything. The house has been smashed up. There's been lots of police involvement and all of these different things. And I suppose to survive through that, I had to reparent myself, because it's not until you deal with someone else's trauma that you begin to think about how you've been parented in the past. So that was really interesting.
So let me get you to hold on 1 second. Okay, so when you say that the house was smashed up, what do you mean by that?
So, like, young people who experience trauma from a really young age have different outlets for their trauma. And so they find it really difficult to regulate their emotions and control the subconscious mind. And so one really common way for that to manifest is through anger. And when the anger is so extreme, it goes right to the precipice, the top of the mountain, and it is only when you get to the top of the mountain that that anger can start to dissipate and young people can come back down. And so to get to the top of the mountain, you have to impact everyone and everything around you, and that was one of the ways that it manifested in my son.
Now, have you, excuse me, you said you were adopted. So did you ever go through that phase, or was that the phase at 15 years old?
Well, and this is what I've reflected on a lot, because as far as I was concerned, it didn't impact me, the fact that I was adopted. Now, it was different because I was adopted from birth and I didn't experience trauma before I was adopted. I didn't go through foster placements and all of these different things. However, it's very possible that that was my way of dealing with it, the fight or flight, and I took flight, and I was fiercely independent because I needed to take that control back, maybe. And that's been a huge reflection for me over the last few years, for sure.
So but okay, so when you were adopted at 4, right? You said?
No, my son, we adopted
Oh,
him when he was
you,
4. Yeah.
you were 6.
I was 0, and then I was at birth. And then when I was 6, I came to Scotland.
Oh, that's what it was. I got that part
Yeah.
mixed up. Right, right, right. Okay, so so when you say trauma with your son, you don't mean do you mean physical trauma, or do you just mean the fact that he was moved around a lot?
So his parents were drug addicts, heroin users, and
Okay.
so we don't know a lot of what went on in the past. But then between the age of 0 and 4, he had like 8 different foster placements,
Oh,
and then
wow.
he was removed from his younger sister also, which was huge. And I think what made him one thing that made him coming to me was that at that time I didn't have any children, and so my energy was completely focused around him, and we had, you know, freedom to build a really positive relationship. And also, Corey, I wasn't tired. You know, parents, and this is something we'll probably come on to, but they're tired. You know, they work full time, they've got all these other things going on, they're getting old, and they're just tired, and they don't have the energy that I probably had at 23 years old to dedicate, you know, every ounce of their being to a young person.
So how old were the people that he was with prior to you?
The last people prior to me were in their 40s.
Okay. That's interesting that you relate it to energy, that the people that I think that's so interesting. I can only fathom um your son's situation, him being, you know, 8 different families. God, I can't even imagine. And then being ripped away from your sister. How, I'm not so sure how that makes sense. I mean, what happens for the sister and the brother to be separated? I mean, is it just the system, or how does that work?
I mean, it is systematic, but it comes from behaviours. And I think both of their behaviours were so extreme that together they kind of bounced off each other. And that meant that both of their behaviours were just far too difficult for one family to deal with. You know, and at the time, and I have so many different beliefs about it, whether it was right, whether it was wrong, but he's turned out to be such a good boy now that I can only think that maybe it was the right decision, you know. So if he hadn't had that universal alignment with me, then he might not be the boy that he is today. So we're both really lucky. We've learned a lot from each other.
That's amazing. So okay, so I'm not sure where we left off actually.
Okay, so I'll tell you what came next, because the story is a bit crazy. So we had all of that to deal with, and then I had my biological daughter. She's 11 years old now. And so life was that, like I said, that kind of expected phase, the married and kids phase. But because of all this, you know, stuff that was going on to deal with the, you know, to do with the trauma, it triggered a kind of trauma in my husband at the time. And that led to a spiral of really challenging behavior. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to bring it up for him. And so we separated, um, and that in itself, you know, was a huge thing. And I felt at that point, you know, I took on my son to provide this safe cocoon, you know, a family, a textbook family. And was I keeping him safe by exposing him to the difficulties within the marriage? And that was when the pattern, you know, that was the pattern interrupt for my life. And that is when things really, really changed, which led me to where I am now.
Okay. So when you say that it changed, what do you mean by that? Meaning that you all separated, you and your I guess now ex.
Yeah.
And then you said that was the pattern interrupt, and then there was a change. What do you mean by the change?
So I found myself as a single parent with, two young children, one who was going through the difficult teenage years and one who was just finding herself in the world. She was 6 years old at the time. And I didn't have any childcare. My mum had died a few years earlier. I didn't, I've got lots of friends, but I was a closed book and wouldn't be open with people about my emotions and things like that. However, I'd always been really into self-development and read, hundreds of pages of books. And I knew that I had to channel what was going on inside me into something in order to be able to survive. And so I Googled Tony Robbins, who was my favourite at the time. And I just, Googled, is he coming to the UK? And lo and behold, he was coming to the UK about 6 months later. Then I looked at the ticket price and I was like oh my goodness, how can I possibly afford this bloody ticket as a single parent? But I told everyone I was going. I booked my flights. I used booking.com. I got a hotel that I didn't need to pay until I got there. And I just had this unwavering belief that I would make it. And being a high school teacher, education, they don't have any money to support professional or personal development. And one day I just thought, I could probably sell this idea to my boss. And maybe he'll give me time off work to go, just time. That's all that I wanted. And I managed to sell the idea to him so well that maybe a week later, he came back and he said, do you know what, Jess? I'm going to buy your ticket. I'm going to send you on that course and you can go. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. So I went to this Tony Robbins event. I had no clue what to expect. I didn't know it was going to be a full-on rave house party that we'd be massaging each other's shoulders and going wild, and Pitbull would turn up and all this stuff. And then I don't know, you'll be familiar with Tony Robbins, but he does like the limiting beliefs, and you go through this process of working out what your limiting beliefs are. And my limiting belief, and I still find this really difficult to say out loud, but my limiting belief was that having kids holds me back. Now, that is a horrible statement for a mother to make, horrible statement, but that's how I felt at the time, because I was restricted. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't emigrate. I couldn't go on holidays. I couldn't even have a weekend with my friends, because I was just mum mode all the time. And then Tony Robbins did his magic, and we changed that into an empowering belief. And so my limiting belief turned into the empowering belief that I have to model to my children that I can do anything, that if I have unwavering belief and I have a toolkit, that even if I fail, I've tried and I've got the strength to, come back from it. And then that's where my, everything changed for me. And I amalgamated what I do in education with what I've experienced as a mum and being a single parent, and then I've created my programs.
So I'll tell you what's so similarly interesting. What year did you go see Tony?
I went to see Tony in 2016. Okay.
So on October 1st, I'll tell you the story really quick. On October 1st of 2018, way back up, in July, I started journaling because my wife said to me, here's a journal, and it says, okay, fine, I'm grateful. And so what it's basically saying is, hey, asshole, you need to write in here and talk about what you're grateful for, because you're clearly not grateful for anything.
Yeah.
And it was so true. So in that book, I wrote the same thing as you, as I'm going to see Tony in November. I had absolutely no idea how, but that's not true. At the time, I didn't know how. And what happened was I was supposed to get paid on October 1st, and I had worked it out that's the day I was going to buy my ticket. Well, I owned a medical spa, and my partner came into my office on October 1st and said, I'm not going to pay you anymore. And so it was a devastating day for two reasons. One, my partner is turning his back on me. And then two, I couldn't buy my ticket to go see Tony.
Yeah.
And I was devastated. And so I want to say October 3rd or 4th, somewhere in that vicinity, I was in the bathroom because I stayed on at the medical spot until the 15th. I was going to ride it out to see if he was going to pull his head out of his ass and pay me.
Yeah.
And October 4th or 5th, I can't remember what day it was, my wife called and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm in the bathroom washing my hands." She said, "I need you to go I need you to go sit in front of your computer." And I was, needless to say, I was probably not in a super grateful mood because of everything that was going on. And I just said, why? And she said, "I just need you to go sit." And she said, "I need you to open your email." And I opened my email. And when I did, it was a message from two emails, one from her and one from somebody at Tony's facility, Robbins Research. And she had negotiated with them and bought the ticket for me. And so
amazing.
It almost chokes me up telling the story. I've told it so many times now that fortunately I can get through it. But I'm telling you, I bawled my eyes out that day because it was probably the nicest thing anybody's ever done for me.
She got your back.
For sure.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting how we both got to Tony and then got there, like you, had no earthly idea what was going to take place. And then all this shit happens. I know. And it's like, and you're up for 16 hours.
I know.
So it started this whole thing for me.
So what was your limiting belief?
I had several, actually. And I had worked on a lot of them before I went, because I would get up in the morning and listen to Tony for at least 2 to 3 hours. That's no joke.
Yeah.
I would listen to probably every piece of his content that he had.
Yeah.
But I would say, I know, so the Dickens process was part of going through that. For me, it was more along the lines of I didn't graduate college. Sorry, I've been sick, so just hang tight. Part of it was I didn't complete college. The second part was is that I felt like I would never make the money that I wanted to make. And I'm not sure. And sometimes I still have that belief. Now, more times than not, I don't. But that belief will creep into my mind from time to time.
Yeah.
And so this past year, since the clinic, since I exited, which was October 15th of 2018, I have literally been working on myself. I went and got my NLP certification, and I've been knee deep in making sure that my mind is right, because whatever I've got coming next, which this podcast is part of it, is really big. And this is a great example. And everybody that's listening to this, believe me when I tell you, I didn't know shit about podcasting. I had this mic sitting on my desk for 3 months until I decided to take action and ask that first person to be on my podcast. And when he said yes, I had no choice but to learn it. And so that's a great example of a limited belief. I told myself, well, I don't know how to do a podcast, and who would even want to be on my podcast? So if anybody's listening, understand that it's just a fucking bullshit belief.
That's it. Absolutely.
Anyway, I didn't mean to go on such a rant, but your story was just so similar to mine with Tony. Yeah. I mean, he's made such an impact on so many people's lives. And that's quite frankly how I know about Ed Milet.
Yeah, sure.
Through Tony. And then I didn't even know who Andy was. I had no idea who he was until one of the Syndicate brothers told me about him. Anyway, so, all right, so I interrupted you. So So in your limiting, okay, so what have you done about that as far as changing that limited belief?
Okay, so I came home that weekend and I told the kids that what my plans were. You know, I'm confident that I can make a huge impact on people. That's what I've done since I've been 22 years old. You know, I went straight into education. I'm a high school teacher, and I worked in a normal school. There was over 1,000 students aged 12 to 18 years old, and did a really good job there, had fantastic success. But what I noticed really quickly was that I had the biggest success with the young people who had been through the most difficult circumstances.
Mm.
And they engaged with me, they built relationships with me. And so I made a leap to we call it the off-site school here. And what that means is it's a school for all of the kids that are kicked out of high school because they have like social, emotional, or behavioral difficulties, and they just can't manage a normal school environment. So I moved to the off-site school and really kind of refined what I do and created a program for young people, and had the opportunity after Tony Robbins to pilot my program, which really focused on building relationships and creating environments where they felt safe, happy, secure, connected, using music, using gratitude, thinking about breathing, all these different things. And off the back of that, for the first time in the history of my school, young people sat exams. They got actual, in their hand qualifications that would get them into further education. And I compare it, like I feel stupid saying it, but I do compare it to the Roger Bannister thing, when he ran the 4-minute, what did he do? He broke the 4-minute mile.
Correct.
And then lots of people did it. Because now in my school, there are examinations and qualifications offered over every curricular area. And before I went, there were none. So I used my program to get young people into a position where they had the capacity to learn, because they were starting to inventory their past. They were starting to think about, their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, but also their neurological well-being. And we built fantastic relationships. I role modeled for them. And so we had this environment of trust and safety. And then that allowed them to tap into academic success. And this is what's led me to realize that teachers need to work on themselves first to be able to produce optimum results.
I can totally 100% identify with that, because teachers, it seems like, now that you say that, and I've never thought about this before, but teachers don't seem very happy.
No. And again, it's a bullshit excuse. To be a good teacher, you don't need technology. It doesn't matter what your class size is. It's all about relationships. And here's the thing, Corey. So when we go to university to learn to be a teacher, the one thing they tell you is that every day you need to act. So regardless of what's went on at home, regardless of how you're feeling, you need to go into that classroom and you need to put on a fucking performance for those kids sitting in front of you. And do you know what I say? That is why there are so many problems in education, because that is not real life. We all have emotions. We all have shit days sometimes. And they do too. And we need to acknowledge that and talk about that, and then model the tools that we use to get out of that funk so that they can too. And if we don't teach them a toolkit, how are they supposed to know?
Great point.
So that's the premise of my business. So we are all about creating an excellent society through early intervention, and that comes with teachers, because teachers spend the majority of time with young people. Sometimes we spend more time with young people than they do with their parents, because we see them on a daily basis. So we work with teachers and we work with parents. And step one is getting the adults into the best place possible to role model what we want the children to learn.
That makes total sense. That makes total sense. I keep getting a weird feedback.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that maybe the mic wasn't on. I don't know. So, okay. So what could you say that would help maybe a teacher or a parent that could be listening to this right now?
So the approach is threefold. So number one, we start with looking at brain development, but the absolute basics. So how to create a healthy brain. And that's just the simple things like you've done 75 hard, right? So Andy knows all this stuff. So it's about having enough water, about good nutrition, about physical activity, about gratitude, and about breathing or meditation, so that when we feel overwhelmed, we can tap straight into that. That's number one. Then we think about relationships. So we think about what makes a good relationship. Some of the things that I've already mentioned, listen, be patient, take time. Relationships can't be built overnight. Sharing vulnerabilities, being raw, open, and honest. Then it's about creating opportunities for success. Young people, we need to build their self-esteem so that they believe in themselves. But then we need to give them an opportunity to fail. And we need to then work through the failure with them so that they can build resilience, so that they can build strategies. And then they can start to trust us because they're feeling safe, they're feeling secure, connected. All these words, I use them all the time because they're so important. And like I said, if we fake what we're doing, if we put on a show for the young people, kids are the biggest critics in the world, right? They can see through that. They don't want a sales pitch. And so if you're going to bullshit them, they're not going to buy into your lesson whatsoever,
So let me ask you, did you go to Arte Live this year?
No, I'm going to Vegas in April.
Okay, so they showed a video, and I wish I knew where to tell you to find the video, but it is exactly what you're talking about. I mean, and I'll give you the general synopsis of it. It's a kid, excuse me, that his dad plays with him. They do shit together. The dad takes him to school, but the dad doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
And the dad is stressed the fuck out. And the dad is trying to put on a show for the kid. And it looks like through the video, he does a really good job. But at the end of it, the kid writes him a letter and says, essentially, the only thing that I really want is that, my dad is great. My dad does this. My dad does this. But my dad also lies. And it was like, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that I realized that young people could tell it's like incongruency, which what that means. There's incongruency if you're telling somebody something that's not true. That's just all there is to it. Your human brain will not allow you to tell a lie without some incongruency, period. It's a fact. It's science.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I wish I had the video. I wish I knew what it was, because it's really interesting.
We can ask in the syndicate group. We can probably find out.
Without a doubt. Yes, for sure.
So step one is brain development, but basic. Step two, relationships. We work on building positive relationships by being raw, open, and honest. Number three, because we have learned how to do all of those things, we can role model. So we need to role model self-belief, self-love, self-care, living in alignment with our values. And then step four is where it gets really interesting. So because we've showed them all of those steps, then we spark the interest in the science and controlling the subconscious brain. And when we've sparked the interest, then we teach it. And this is the bit that I'm really kind of passionate about. So this is the bit that teachers and parents really, really need to learn, because this is like the magic ingredient for changing your life.
You know, I wish more people, gosh, I'm getting such a feedback. So weird. I wish more people knew. Can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I wish more people knew about how the subconscious mind worked, because if they did, I think people would change the way they do things. I don't think majority of people know the difference in your conscious and your subconscious mind. So, I've done a shit ton of work with both. And, we do things, I think about 96 to 97% of what we do every day, correct me if I'm wrong, is on a subconscious basis.
Yeah,
You know,
100%,
right.
100%. Yeah. And because of that, the statistic I think for America is that 70% of people live in a state of negative emotion,
Wow.
which is
70%.
crazy. Yeah, 70% of people in America live in a state of negative emotion because they always choose comfort, which means living in the past. And that's obviously linked to survival mode. The brain's always in survival mode, and that comes from the caveman days, doesn't it? And
Yes.
so we need to be in charge of our minds, which means that we need to program the autonomic system, nervous system. So that's the bit that we need to practice, stepping out of the comfort zone and stepping out of the subconscious mind and reprogramming the autonomic nervous system.
So I guess you probably have never listened to Joe Dispenza, have you?
Oh, of course I have, He's my favorite. I love him.
Oh my gosh, is he not just incredible?
Amazing. But nobody knows this stuff. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's so important and so simple. And, we need to learn about these things. So this is the bit where I'm saying, we need to spark the interest in the science. We need to teach them how to program, they reprogram the nervous system so they're living in a joyful state and they get addicted to that feeling. And then we go and inventory the past and we change what has been ingrained into our systems into something that is going to create our future reality.
Absolutely. So one of the things so I just wanted to give an example really quick. For me, as a kid, I was always told, I was a fat kid, right?
Okay.
And so I was always told to clean my plate as a kid before I got dessert. So in order to get dessert, which you don't fucking need every night, I had to eat everything on my plate, regardless if I was full or if I wasn't full.
Yeah.
So that's exactly, and to this day, I think there are times that I eat all the food on my plate because of that. I know that's the
reason.
Yeah. So that's just an example of one of the, so one of the things that as a kid that, we're programmed at an early age to do that we just carry throughout our life. And that's why in America, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's high as shit that people are obese.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, who wants to live in that? Because when you live in a negative state, you don't feel good. We want to feel every day like it's Christmas morning. We want to have that elevated state, the serotonin, the dopamine, the endorphins. We want everything to be in this optimum place. And when we're in the optimum place in terms of education and accessing academic results, when we're in that optimum brain space, elevated emotional state, then the myelin pathways build thicker and faster and we retain the information, and then we can recreate it for the next generation. And the more young people we impact, then eventually that's going to filter through and everybody's going to experience it from day dot. And you know what that impact is on the whole of society across the whole of the world, and everyone would be excellent.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
There's no excuse.
No, there's really not. And I wonder, I think it's so fantastic that you're bringing the education system in the UK. I wonder how you could penetrate the United States. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of contacts now through Arity, which is amazing. And I have told Ed Milet that I'm going to be on his podcast one day. So, look out for me. It's on the vision board, and it is a long-term plan. So the UK is my number one, and I have links with Australia in terms of education at the moment as well. And then hopefully it's going to snowball, because how can people not listen to this stuff? It's life-changing. It's world changing, and I just can't imagine people not having this information.
Yeah, it is absolutely astonishing from time to time to listen to how negative. I mean, people, and look, I'm not excluded. I have my days. I for sure, today was one of those days. I woke up, I'm sick, my nose is clogged up. I've got shit to do, and I don't have time to be sick.
But that's what it's about, Corey, isn't it? So we all have negative emotions. We all have low moods. We all feel overwhelmed and stressed sometimes, but it's about learning to shorten the refractory period and use the toolkit to move out of that quicker every single time, because we know that our hearts are fuller. And that's scientific as well, isn't it? Because when we're in the elevated state, the blood pumps to our heart fills with blood quicker, and we feel incredible. And we have the capacity to change that. So yes, it is our autonomic nervous system, which is the subconscious brain, that controls the heart rate and the fight or flight, the arousal, all of the emotions. But it can be programmed, and that's what people don't realize. And that's the bit that we need to work on. But we can only do that when we've taught them the basics, when we've built the relationships, when we've role modeled that it works, and then we can teach them the method. And that's when change is going to happen. But we need to do all of those steps first. And you and me can't do it alone. We need to teach all of the parents, all of the teachers, and hope and ensure that it filters through.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this up, actually. I'm so glad that you came on today for multiple reasons, but I just thought about something. I was interviewing another guy sometime last week, and he said, I go into the school, and he's got, I've got tattoo on at least this arm, and he's got tattoos all over him, and he drives a Lamborghini, and he was like, and he's known as Lambo Dad. Well, it's funny to him because he goes to the school and the kids flip their shit because he drives up in a Lamborghini and he's got tattoos all over him. So, but he goes in and he mentors the kids.
Yeah.
And it's cool because, him being the guy that he is with tattoos, and people don't expect us to walk into a school and be a mentor. They expect us to walk into the school and burn it down.
Yeah.
So the point of me telling you all this is that he said, hey, there's a group that I'm linked up with that I can link you up with that will help you to go into schools and mentor people. And so I'm going to start doing that. And I didn't think about it until just now, how it connects with exactly what you're talking about, because the kids need to see that it's not just one way. It's not come to school, sit down, like we've always all both heard, sit down, shut up, do your work, don't talk, raise your hand if you want to be heard. There's a different way to do that, because we're programming children to go out into the world and just do the same shit over and over. And we need people to think for themselves.
100%. Maybe we can link up on that. Maybe we can share some strategies, and we can talk about that more.
I think that would be an absolutely great idea. I've got to get some more information on it. In fact, I've touched base with one of the guy, whoever he is, but he has not touched back yet. So I'm going to do that as soon as we get off the phone. I'm going to touch base with him again so I can make sure that I follow up. And I'll follow up with you, because you've got a lot of experience in this, and you can help me if you're willing to do that.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, so the other people that you have that you work with at we call it our alternative school, I think is what it's called here.
Okay. Yeah.
What did you call it?
Off-site school.
Yeah. So the other people that are helping you there, do they share the same vision? I mean, are they like-minded?
I mean, all of the staff that work within the school are there because they want to make a difference. They're all fantastic. They're all, skilled in relationship building. I think that I'm next level. I know that I'm next level.
Sure.
My boss invests in me. They know it too. And realistically, I'm not going to be in that job for much longer because the focus is the global impact. However, it's really difficult to leave when I know the difference that I'm making on the ground, and I'm creating impact on all of the people within that building. And so I need to be confident that other people can do that when I leave. So in some ways I'm preventing myself from, going as fast as I want to with the business by the desire to look after the kids that I've got there at the moment. I was going to say something else there. So my program that I developed and had success with, I actually asked for a different member of staff to deliver the program, to pilot whether the success was the program or whether the success was the way that I delivered it.
And
What do you think?
I would say that, that's tough because I'm going to say that the program itself probably did well, but you delivering it was probably the difference. And that's the hold on why you can't move forward.
Absolutely. And it also confirms that we need to teach the teachers. And when I actually did a different podcast last week, another American one, and he asked me, he said, what would you say to a teacher who says their job is to deliver content? And for me, that is where they are absolutely doing their job wrong, because a teacher's job is not to deliver content. Any old person can deliver content, read a textbook, teach yourself, and then deliver it. A teacher's job is to get results. And you can't get results unless you go through a process of building relationships. With some kids, of course you will. Some kids just want to, absorb themselves in education. But the ones that you want to really make a difference with, because they can't do it without your help, need the process, need the toolkit, need the role models, need the relationships.
The relationship is such an important part, because if the children think you care, or if they know you care, they're going to work twice as hard. If they think you don't care, they're not going to do shit for you.
Well, if they think you don't care, they're not in and they don't feel safe, and they can't, how can they switch on their brain for learning if they can't feel safe and secure? We know what that situation's like. We're always scanning for danger. And the minute we feel that there's some kind of threat, then we're agitated. We're not present in the moment and what's going on in front of us, because we're too busy, in survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we'll wrap up in just a moment, but what would you say if I said to you that you should have somebody that you trust, which you should have somebody at this point that's almost like a right-hand person to you, a go-to person. What would you say if I said, okay, why don't you turn some of your responsibilities or a lot of them over to that person and then work on the bigger picture?
I do. So I have a team of people that I meet with once a week, and I'm developing them to deliver the same quality. And what's been really, really reassuring is that they've said to me, we need you to be a mentor, because although we're fantastic at our jobs, we need a more balanced, targeted approach. So they can recognize it. They can recognize it.
Sure. Okay. So how quickly do you think you can get those people up to speed to where you're confident that you can step away at least 4 days a week?
It's up to them. How quickly do they want to, how quickly do they want to embrace it? And in my school, I'm really lucky because everybody is there for the right reasons. But on a wider scale, the thing that gets me is that teachers don't become teachers for the paycheck, because let's face it, the money is ridiculous. It's not nearly what they deserve. So at some stage, they had the passion. Then they lose it because they get swept up in the politics, and they need to find their passion again. And as soon as they find that passion, they are going to bring value.
Good answer. So let me ask you one more last thing. So what if I said to you that, I wonder if part of them them depending on you is a crutch. Do you see what I'm saying? So what I mean by that is, you said, well, they say the people say they need me to be a mentor and to kind of still hold their hand. You didn't say that, but kind of hold their hand. Do you think it's a lack of confidence? Do you think why do you think they need like this direct touch with you in order for them to move forward and continue on?
Because they are so passionate about making a difference that they just want to learn and provide the best service possible to the young people. And obviously that takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of confidence. I mean, I've done years of development work, I've done years of research. A lot of people don't even know who Tony Robbins or Dr. Joe Dispenza are, and so it takes quite a bit of time to really understand the science. And really, this stuff should be taught right at the source. This should be taught in teacher training. It should be taught at parents' school, if parents' school was such a thing. We just need to get the information out there, and that's my job. That's my job. Get the information out there, then the right people with the right passion will pick it up, and we will make a difference within the world.
Perfect. All right, Jessica. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on, and you've really opened my eyes to a lot of the education system that and my mom was a school teacher, but it's been years now. So I think your approach is fucking awesome. And keep up with the good work, because I know you're making a difference in the world. And if you think about your difference that you're making in all these kids' lives, you're really making a difference in their kids' lives and their kids' lives. So you're doing something really fucking cool. So you should be really proud of yourself.
Thanks, Corey. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And thanks for the time today. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been great. Absolutely.
My pleasure. And I'll circle back with you about the other project, and we'll see what we can do.
Sure. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.